in mineral sector development projects globally, quite a lot in Africa. In Uganda, we worked for a number of years, around 2010. We also work for the private sector. I was going to say as well that when we work with governments and donors, we work a lot with sustainability issues, environmental and social issues around mining development. We also work for the private sector in the area of ESG, for example, ESG training, due diligence, and so on.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Is this working? Yep, my name is Nabil Alam. I'm the country manager for Consolidated African Resources, which is a graphite mining project which we are developing in northern Uganda. That's about 85 kilometers from Kitgum in northern Uganda. There we have a very substantial graphite deposit. For the last 3 or 4 years, we've been doing some product testing, drilling, and completing the definitive feasibility study. And we're hoping to be in production by the end of this year with the stage 1 plant. Personally, I'm a civil engineer with a background in oil and gas and wind farming and mining operations.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we'll kick it off with Siraj. And the first question that comes to you based on the topic that we are here to address is, what is ESG and what are the new EU ESG standards? And where does Uganda stand in terms of the gap between where Uganda's mining sector is and what the EU new ESG standards are? And how can we be able to work, especially with the newly inaugurated Uganda National Mining Company, to be able to bridge these gaps?
Thank you, Mashaba. And ESG is environmental, social, and governance concerns that are very important for the mining sector. And I think in 2023, the EU was able to outline a number of standards that really can support the mining sector as well as other sectors of different economies. And I should say that me who sits in the EITI, most of the standards are in sync with what EITI standard stipulates. Because when you look at issues to do with the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, this is exactly what we are practicing with the EITI, trying to look at how we can report on issues of human rights, how we can report on issues of environmental impact, on how we can report on issues of governance, and how we can report on very many issues that will support sustainable mining operations. Aware that Uganda was admitted into EITI in 2020, we have had 3 reports to our name, the EITI reports for Uganda. And when you look at what the report stipulates, is trying to get out exactly what EU is stipulating in its standards. Reporting on gender issues, reporting on environment, reporting on revenues, reporting on the legal and policy frameworks that are governing the sector in the form of governance. And when you access the website for EITI, you should be able to get the information. But I want to preoccupy myself with the practice and the gaps. What is it that we are doing in Uganda, and what are the gaps? In the first place, I want to believe that the standards and both the EU and the EITI standards are well written and really would guide the sector to great heights. But to me, I think the implementation and the practice has a lot of gaps. In the first place, if you look at EITI, which has the mandate also of following up issues of climate change, emissions, environment reporting, at least as per the 2023 EITI standard, you find that that would be very good if actually companies were reporting in that line. But when it comes to enforcement and then the implementation, you find that when you Google and get to the EITI report, we are not getting the compliance that we need. Companies cannot report their emissions. Companies cannot report the way they are mitigating climate change. They are not reporting their environmental expenditures very well. And one of the reasons why we are not getting that well done is that EITI is not anchored in our law. And therefore, it almost becomes a voluntary outfit for people either to comply or not to comply. And therefore, even if one company complies and another is not complying, there is no sort of penalty or reprimand that is going to happen to one company and the other one which is not complying. So I think, first of all, the framework for for these standards, both the EU and EITI, need to be well entrenched in our national laws, so that if anyone defaults any of the standards, then our local laws can actually hold them accountable. That's one. The second thing is that even what is within the law, for example, if you look at having the environmental and social impact assessments that have to be in place, you find that the enforcement is very limited, because by law, NEMA is supposed to do that. But if we ask how many companies are complying and having in place the environmental impact assessments, environmental and social impact assessments, first of all, they are very few. Then those which comply, sometimes it is to tick boxes, and the implementation of what is in those reports is always a problem. Later on, the monitoring, which is also inadequate. So I think it is important that we look around and say how we can strengthen the frameworks in the first place to make sure that they can hold us accountable in terms of complying, but also to make sure that implementation monitoring to ensure compliance of the stakeholders must be well monitored by both government and also civil society, for example. That I remember sometime back we had a project where we are doing OECD due diligence monitoring for all of the mine sites, trying to see if you are selling gold. Are you getting it from areas where there is hazardous child labor? Are you getting it from areas where you are actually destroying the environment and what? So that if a mine site is actually not complying to the ECG standards, then it is reported as such, and maybe it should be recommended for closing it down or something. And this is the monitoring which I don't see, for example, in Uganda, and therefore we see a number of ills happening in all these places, but there is no that kind of reprimand that we can have to improve the situation.
Thank you very much, Siraj. I think you raised two fundamental points, and one is the issues around the legal framework and how companies can be made to comply as per whatever law that needs to be put in our legal framework. And the second point is obviously with that, then you can have enforcement and monitoring to drive compliance. And this brings me to Henry. GIZ, I think, is been a big partner for the government of Uganda. And what Siraj raises is very fundamental. And we'll park that, you don't have to answer it for now. But to tie into what he's saying, there's been an issue around traceability and the implementation of the regional traceability mechanism to enhance Uganda's mineral into the global supply chain. How is that fundamentally pinned into what Siraj has been highlighting? And what do we need to do as a country to be able to boost this?
Thank you, Agri, for thank you, Agri, for the question. For the purposes of context, so traceability ensures the documentation, verification of origin, journey, and handling of minerals from the point of extraction to the point of export. Now, Uganda recently launched the regional certification mechanism as a standardized framework to ensure that minerals are responsibly sourced, and at the point of export, once a certificate is issued, it is a guarantee that the minerals being exported are conflict-free. There is transparency and compliancy along the supply chains of these minerals, and these are mostly the 3TG, all the designated minerals. Now, one would ask, why is this important for Uganda's context? Major markets like the EU and the US are enforcing stringent regulations that require or mandate companies in these markets to ensure compliancy, to clean supply chains, ensure that minerals that are ending up in the markets in the US, in the EU, do not in any way contribute to conflict, especially in the Great Lakes region, but also human rights violation and latest environmental degradation. Now, by Uganda implementing the regional certification mechanism, this gives them a big opportunity to access these crucial markets. So the overall point here is market access, because without traceability, if your supply chains are not clean and you cannot justify that your supply chains are clean, then you don't have market for your minerals. And of course, there will be alternatives for sourcing, but also alternative raw materials. The other point here is investment, responsible investments and partnerships. Increasingly, investors are prioritizing ESG criteria, and here they are fronting ESG criteria as a key driver for sustainable investment decisions. On our way to a future, to an electric future, it is really mandatory, and it is not business as usual that actors must protect human rights, ensure that there is upholding of environmental protection, and that the critical raw materials that are driving the green energy revolution do not in any way violate the ESG criteria. And here I cite an example. If you read the latest raw materials report from Mercedes-Benz, they attest to this. I mean, for them, compliance to human rights and environmental protection along their supply chains is not negotiable for them. So it is crucial that countries like Uganda implement regional certification mechanism, traceability, as a way to unlock access of their market, access to these markets for their producers, but also to attract responsible investments. I mentioned earlier on in my introduction that the EU and German government are joining hands to support the mining sector in Uganda. It's because of the recent strides, for example, in reviewing the legal framework, implementing the certification mechanism, that Uganda is now attracting investment. And one would ask, why now? Because of these that might look like small steps, but are really vital in the world that is driving towards cleaner energies. The other importance of traceability is to do with curbing of illegal mining and smuggling. Traceability ensures that mineral supply chains are cleaned up, there's transparency, and there's consistency of data collection. Actually, the kind of data that you're required to gather in the supply chain, what is called the chain of custody data, is in such a way that you document whoever has come into custody of these minerals. This way, there is full accountability. You account for your minerals. It is an indirect way of easily getting the accountability. Right now, the Ugandan mining sector is struggling with oversight. there is limited oversight that is currently ongoing, but with traceability, you're actually addressing this indirectly. So it is an opportunity to address illegal mining, but also to reduce revenue leakages. You lose a lot of revenue if your supply chains are not controlled. And so traceability presents this opportunity for Uganda, but also integrating ASMs into formal supply chains. At the moment, 80% of the mining sector is dominated by ASMs, but there's little accountability as to where are their minerals going, where are they ending up. There's little accountability, and so traceability is one of those tools that will unlock this potential in the Ugandan mining sector. The number of other points, such as data-driven decisions, because of course you now generate a lot of information while implementing the traceability, and so government is able to plan better. But also you have your revenue ending up now in government, but also in local communities. They will eventually now see the value of mining activities going around. The other most important point, and this will be my last, is to do with regional integration and cooperation. At the moment, there is a big drive in Uganda for value addition, and it's important that as you embark on this ambitious drive, it's also important to unlock the source of these raw materials. So it is through mechanisms like traceability that are joint mechanisms, for example, in the Great Lakes region, that can provide a platform to discuss joint projects and cooperation. Thank you, Agri.
Thank you very much. I think you raised some fundamental points on traceability. That is conflict minerals, data, leakages, proliferation, name it. Basically, the idea is to know where the minerals are coming from, where they are going, but also to be able to access markets. I saw Carl listening very intently. You want to add something?
Yeah, maybe, thank you very much. Just listening to what has been said, lots of good things. A couple of reflections that I pick up. I agree fully with the first speaker there that it's very much like the gap comparing EU and Uganda. It's very much about implementation. Looking at Uganda's laws, they're not too bad, to put it in a very simple way. There are provisions for environmental and social, say, regulation and so on that would go very far in terms of having the sector to work in the right way. But it's very much about implementation, I would say. So how do you close the gap? I think one of the original questions were around. And it's already been mentioned, responsible investment is probably a good route to go. I want to connect back to Slavek and the morning session we had. He was talking about the Critical Raw Materials Act, within which there are provisions for applying for strategic projects, and about 30%, I think you said, are outside of the EU, and you could have strategic projects in Uganda as well. And one of the key criteria there when you want to apply for a strategic, say, a mining project or a processing project, is to show that you will deal with ESG issues in the right way. So that's a core part of the assessment of strategic project applications. So by bringing in strategic projects to Uganda, you will kind of start off by knowing that this is a company that knows how to work with ESG. So that's a good thing, and sort of similar to that, I mean, you want to attract investment that has ESG knowledge, and what we see sometimes in our ESG due diligence work is that investors, of course, they are prepared to spend funds on helping out with ESG issues, ESG planning strategies and so on, but we even see customers, buyers of, for example, mineral concentrate, even if they're not investing, it's just a business deal, they buy concentrate. But if the deal is important enough to them, then they are prepared to support the company that, for example, that is mining and producing the concentrate, they're willing to support quite substantially development of ESG work within that company. Both professionally, just helping out with expertise, but also financially, for example, to finance ABC auditing and ABC training and things like that. So responsible investment and can attracting responsible investors can go a long way.
Thank you, Carl. So what you're saying is that it's not enough to do just traceability, but it's also important to attract responsible investors because they come along with them the fundamentals of ESG. I think that's the point you want to make. Yeah. Thomas, you wanted to add something in 1 minute?
Yes, maybe quickly a comment because we were talking about traceability. And then I totally agree, you were showing where it should lead to, but I'm representing academia up here, so I would like to go one step before, and ask a question. If we already have these databases that we will need to actually have a fingerprint of the minerals that we want to trace.
Sorry, come again?
If we already have the databases to see, because it's not so easy, fingerprinting of minerals coming from the research, of course, doing a lot of characterization work. I mean, geology and mineralogy is extremely complicated. It's not a homogeneous fingerprint. I mean, I think the wording is not the right one because you have a lot of substitutions and other processes. You can have in one ore deposit more than one generation of the ore. So you have to do a lot of analytical work and to build up a very, good database, and you have a very clear analytical procedure to then come up, with something like traceability, like fingerprinting of minerals. And there's like one example, from the region, coltan, neoptantalum ore. I think BGR had a project on that some 15 years ago, where, they were building up a database, and it took several years to get such a tool. It's a geoforensic tool, actually, to develop, to then be able to trace minerals. So, thank you.
So thank you, Thomas. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying that you're happy to sit with GIZ also and the government to support them in creating a tool for what is already existing as a database. Mr. Keddy, we have someone from government. I think you've heard from Thomas. I think after the session, you can have a conversation and we see how we can be able to support this traceability conversation. Fortunately, we have someone who is already invested in Uganda, Mr. Nabil Alam, and is invested in one of the biggest projects that we are working on as a country, some of our biggest investors, and that's in one of the transition minerals, graphite. And coming to you, Nabil, you've had the conversations, you've been a player in the country. Could you expound more about the opportunities in this type of minerals for energy transition or green minerals, and what you see, what is the outlook of the country?
Okay. First of all, I want to sort of re-emphasize the importance of the question. Why is it important that we look at clean energy opportunities in Uganda? Why is it important that we understand them? The answer is that we already have a massive head start as a mining jurisdiction that it often gets talked about, but I don't think it's quite emphasized enough. I can't emphasize it enough myself. The fact that we have an almost fully renewable power grid with 85% of our energy being hydropower and 5% solar, virtually no use of diesel or coal, gives us an enormously advantageous position in the global marketplace for finance. Finance is a competition. People have to choose where they put their money, and when green jurisdictions are talked about, they mention places like Canada and Australia primarily, and I think we are streets ahead of them in terms of our grid, which automatically gives us 100 different ways to go carbon neutral, let's say net zero, without even offsetting carbon credits, to be a carbon negative mine. And this is an opportunity that has to be seized. So how do we do it? Okay, I talked about power. We have abundant green power. We have surplus power generation. So when we look at electrifying the entire operation with an attempt to go net zero on every mine, or not every mine, but almost every mine, the door is practically open for us. So if we want to electrify the fleet, which is something we are doing as a company, Blencow, we're looking at electrification of the mining operation itself. We're looking at electrification of the fleet, exporting the material all the way to the coast. These are quite significant infrastructure changes, which we cannot do ourselves entirely. We can, but it would be ideal if there were partners for it. So we've been working with some logistics companies to spread the upfront investment of an EV transport route through Kenya to the coast. And I think there's room here. We're talking about what opportunities there are for people to get involved in this sort of thing. Logistics companies, transport companies should take a lead role in gathering all the potential miners, even the oil and gas industry, steel industry, to centralize some of the investment and infrastructure needed to go for a carbon neutral fleet. And I think we have already had conversations with quite a few different parties, setting up a three-way tripartite agreement with supplier of EV trucks, with the companies that might want to use them, to pull together and set up sort of a grid like this. It's very early days. It's very it's a bit of an undertaking, but it's not complicated to do because everybody has to have the same goals. If we can be carbon neutral mines, then we'll be investors will pay a lot more attention to us. You know, we know that in Europe the battery has to have a passport indicating where everything came from. Is it carbon neutral? Has it been sustainably mined? So there's opportunities there in transport. I think there's opportunities also elsewhere that I'm not actually sure if people talk about this or not, but carbon sequestration as a corollary to a mining operation is potentially transformational. Just to give you a little background, you can, in certain mines, in certain areas, it's not applicable everywhere, but in certain mines, there are certain types of ultramafic rocks which have the capacity to absorb carbon in the same way that trees do. But using forestry, which is a common idea, everybody knows using bamboo and forestry to sequester carbon is a common thing. But at some point, those trees die and the carbon is re-released into the atmosphere. So you get a certain price for your carbon credit. When you mineralize the carbon by using either your tailings or the mine rock itself to sequester carbon, you're sequestering it permanently. You're mineralizing it. And so your carbon credit value is much higher. So you have their capacity to use, I've heard of some cases where sequestration is the primary part of the business and mining is the secondary part of the business. And I think this is an avenue that needs to be very thoroughly explored. It's an opportunity to help our mines become carbon neutral, but also to help our supporting industries. I'll come back onto that a bit later. So yes, that involves an opportunity there is in the quantification of the carbon credits. Specialist companies dedicated to helping miners and perhaps other industries compute exactly their carbon footprint, decide how many carbon credits they can get for doing what, and finding a mechanism for transferring those over. I think it's a very, very important opportunity. In our case, we're a new mine, so it's easy to set up some of the infrastructure. I'm going back to electrification of the fleet, sorry. But even in existing mines, Uganda presents a really wonderful opportunity to reduce your carbon footprint by using bioethanol, for example. We have lots of sugarcane, lots of cane production, which produces ethanol as a byproduct, and not a tremendous amount of utility for that, apart from alcohol or something else. With a little bit of work on regulatory approvals, I think there's many players in the sugar industry keen to use biodiesel in their products, and that could be an important way to reduce the carbon footprint. So again, that involves third-party players, people who will invest in setting up liaising with the government, setting up the approvals and setting up the infrastructure necessary. But again, a very, very important avenue. So I guess in the end, my key point is that there's an opening in the sort of partnering and collaboration sector. Individual miners, individual companies probably can't do a great deal on their own, but with the support of certain specialists in terms of the carbon credit sector, bioethanol sector, sequestration sector, people have a role to play in bringing the entire industry together and heading towards something carbon neutral. When it comes to building the mines, for example, you use steel. Of course, default position is that you get steel from China, and it's much cheaper, of course. It's easy to put up, but we have a pretty thriving steel industry in Uganda. If we can work with those steel producers and the miners for the iron ore to help bring everything into a carbon neutral place so that your entire supply chain is carbon neutral, from the construction of the factory, the mining itself, the transport to the port, has the potential to be carbon neutral. And I can think of a few other places. I can think of no other place in the world where that is possible, and where if you were attempting to do so, you would be in such an advantageous position to start with.
Thank you very much. I think you've heard from the man in the arena. He has well elaborated the whole ecosystem, the supply chain, the value chain, the linkages of the opportunities that we have in Uganda. Insurance companies, bankers, manufacturers, steel, transporters, every single person has the ability to be able to benefit from one single resource or one single mine. Which now brings me to Carl. Having heard what Nabil has elaborated and the opportunities that are bound, from the buyer's side, and I'm calling buyer's market, which is the European Union, what opportunities do you see in terms of the value addition into the products that would be ready for use or would be easy to enter the European Union market based on the different commodities that we could have as a country?
Well, that's a tricky one. I'm not really a value addition expert, but if the thoughts that come to mind would concern mostly, if you talk about value addition at the mining stage, you kind of, per definition, value addition would be, making the products more valuable. And how do you do that? Well, you decrease the intermediate costs, really, the inputs. And I'm, I haven't thought much about the energy situation in Uganda, but I'm very impressed about what I hear, and that could be, both. So it's really, if you can get like a concerted effort to get that right in Uganda with energy, it will certainly be really attractive to investors. And it can also add a lot of value to the product at the mining stage. So that's something I will be looking forward to see, how things will develop in that regard.
Thank you. So maybe getting back to GIZ, Henry, maybe to supplement on what Carl has highlighted, on what value opportunities, because I know you'll do a little bit of work on this side that would be available for the people in the room to understand in the mining value chain.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Agri. First of all, there is an increasing demand for CRMs, and so this is a unique opportunity for Uganda to unlock the full potential of its mining sector. Of course, as I said, there's a big drive for value addition, but before we get there, I think there is a number of steps that we need to undertake in order to unlock this potential. First of all, fundamentally for me is a comprehensive market value analysis. I think this is extremely important for Uganda because, yes, there is value addition, but what does it mean? We want to add value, but is it possible for every mineral that we have? So it's important in the first place that we get to understand what we have And what is our competitive advantage? Because all of a sudden everyone wants to add value. Everyone is on the same ambitious drive to add value, but what is your competitive advantage? What is your selling point? I mean, take an example of DRC and Zambia, for example. They have quite a fair share of the cobalt and copper market, in that if they had any drive towards value addition, it's very possible because of their fair share of the market. So this is the same thing for us. What is that champion commodity that Uganda can concentrate efforts to drive value addition? The second one is legal framework. I mean, there is really a legal framework, but it's a question of to what extent does it address value addition. At the moment, we have export restrictions, but I mean, is it really policy? Is it based on, let's say, on some of these ideas that we've identified competitive or unique opportunities within the mining value chain that would want to take advantage of? You know, these are the questions to ask. Export restrictions might be, I mean, good in the short term. They might attract for you some investments, but in the long run, I mean, you will not attract any external investments. And I think that over time, the world will move on. I think this is an important lesson to learn, that the world will move on. What you regard as critical today, the next day, alternatives will be there. And so you'll have it in the ground and it will be there for keeps. The other one is access to finance. I think this is an important aspect, especially in the mining sector of Uganda, dominated by the ASMs. Access to finance is a very important aspect to unlock the potential of this sector. Perhaps in the morning session, one person mentioned that people in agriculture are not using computers because they do not have awareness that this will only cost them $300 and it makes their work rather easy. So access to finance, training, skilling, and equipping, I think is very key to drive a value addition in Uganda, but also research and development. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Henry. So Henry is talking about us doing a competitive analysis, especially knowing that the other countries doing a lot of production of certain minerals. As a country, to see which are those minerals that we could be able to produce optimally, but also beneficial to the country. And I know the chamber with the ministry are working on this plan and the Presidential Investors Roundtable of about 5 main minerals to see what areas the country needs to focus on in terms of value addition. But Thomas, you had spoken about the technology around the data of traceability. I don't know if you could also help us to amplify for a country like Uganda, a couple of mines that are not in use or have been disused. What is the best way we can get them back running again or optimize them based on whatever it is that they are doing or not doing at the moment?
Thank you, very good question. And actually, I think I should maybe talk a little about the Swedish way and you know, how maybe Uganda can also profit from the experience that we have in Sweden. Because in Sweden, I'm actually part of the Team Sweden Mining. And what is a success model in Sweden is the triple helix. And I will quickly explain what this is. The triple helix is a model where academia, the government, and the industry works together on a common strategy for the country. And that is actually what really drives innovation. So for example, the center where I'm director of, CAM, is a governmental funded research center at the university. And we are working, of course, on fundamental basic research. So we are testing ideas, innovative ideas, how we can make mining more sustainable, more efficient. And based on these ideas, then we go up in technical readiness levels to implement them, hopefully in the future, in the mining industry. So then working together with the industry on implementing these ideas. And so when we talk about sustainable mining, then we should think about efficient mining. In Sweden, we have the Aitik mine. It's a copper mine, a porphyry copper mine, that is currently the most efficient mine on the globe. The ore grade of this mine, and it's a very productive mine, it's 0.2% copper. What does this mean? And now we talk about responsible mining. This means that 99.8% that we mine is waste. So just think about these numbers. 0.2% is the ore grade. This is actually, if you go to Chile, to the porphyries, the grade of the tailing pond. This is the ore grade in Sweden. So there's a lot of technology and knowledge that we can use, to be more sustainable. But this brings me to the next point about waste. I don't like this word when we talk about responsible mining. Okay? We have to think that what we mine is a sheer resource. So we should be much more creative in finding usage for this material that we mine. We have to be very innovative in this perspective. And I will give you an example from Sweden. I cannot talk so much about Uganda. Hopefully next time, it's the first time for me in Uganda. I'm learning a lot currently, and I hope next time I can also connect it to Uganda. But in Sweden, two big mines up there in the north. So I just explained Aitik, the copper mine, and there's Kiruna, a world-class deposit for iron ore, actually providing 90% of the iron for the European market. And that is a state-owned company. So Aitik has copper, and they produce a lot of waste. And in this waste, they have a mineral called pyrite. So for those of you who are working with the environmental issues of mining, they know that pyrite is a troublemaker, because if it gets on the surface, it's oxidizing, it can create acid mine drainage. Okay? So that is, of course, a waste that you don't want to have. But at Aitik now, they collect this pyrite, because in Kiruna, in the iron mine, they have apatite. And this apatite, it's a calcium phosphate, has rare earth elements. So what they now do this to companies, they take the waste, so the pyrite, they make sulfuric acid, and with this sulfuric acid, they leach the apatite with the rare earth elements from the other mine, from the Kiruna iron ore mine. And this brings us, what was considered a troublemaker in the waste to a product that we can use, for sustainable mining. I think that is a very nice example how also, academia, innovation, the government, as Kiruna, as LKAB, as a state-owned company, together with the industry like Boliden, is working together on common solution for sustainable mining. And I think we can really work together, on new ideas to make mining really more sustainable and environmental friendly. Thank you.
Well. I think that's quite a lesson, and also interesting to hear about the 0.2%
Yes.
copper mine and its efficiency, something that needs to be looked into. Carl, you have any additions to that?
I always have additions. Lots of thoughts going around, but I think it's so interesting, 0.2%. I bet the tailings in Kilembe would run at a much higher grade than the actual Sweden's top mine. So it's an opportunity. It should have been thought about already, re-mine the waste in Kilembe. So I'm just guessing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, I think now I come back to the audience. We have a bit of time to take a couple of questions. For those who have any questions, kindly put up your hand. A mic will be passed on to you. Your question directed to the person that you'd like to ask. Questions? I wish we all understood everything the panel was speaking about. There's a question here, and another one here from this beautiful lady. Your name, the question directed to, and then your question.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm called Arthur Latium. I'm an AI, machine learning, and robotics engineer. And Mr. Thomas has been speaking about technology, and he has caught my attention. My question is very simple. On the aspect of mining environment, yes, how can we blend in AI, machine learning, and robotics to reduce on risks and simplify work?
Thank you. There's a lady here.
Good afternoon. My name is Jill Whitehouse. I'm with the Uganda Chamber of Energy and Minerals. My question would be to Mr. Nabil. While I understand you're still in the exploration process right now, what would you say are some of the social barriers that you're facing with the community, if any, and how do you plan on tackling them if you are to go to production? Because I'm sure by now you've already identified some of the social issues that may come about. Another question is to Mr. Siragi of EITI. Are there any initiatives or capacity building initiatives, particularly for ASM, that will incentivize or encourage them to follow better practices, that is, when it comes to particularly gold and rare earth metals and gemstones? Yes. Are there any initiatives that you have, particularly in capacity building, to incentivize ASM miners to be more traceable with their minerals, particularly in gold, the rare earths, and gemstones?
Any other questions so far? So we can take the first round. Okay, I think let's answer those first two. Thomas, the gentleman on technology and how it fuses into everything you've been highlighting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Arthur, for the good question. And that's actually, of course, we should also talk about machine learning and AI, because this is actually happening right now, and we are totally aware that we have to implement these tools. We should consider them tools, very helpful tools. And what we have maybe as an issue is that we are not very good in sharing information. So we have to feed, our systems, our algorithms, with good data. And only then, we can expect to get good results out. It's like garbage in, garbage out principle. But of course, AI, machine learning, we heard about Cobalt, the company, that discovered big copper deposits, in Africa recently. Of course, AI is coming in, but I've actually listened one of the talks, from Cobalt, and they said, the success of our tool is based on 100 years of good geological work in the field, because they were basically digitizing all of this information they had in field books, and with this, they fed their system, and then they were able to discover this kind of new copper discovery. So we need to have a very good platform of data, and this means that we have to, across disciplines, work together and create such a platform. And that brings me back, to traceability. What kind of databases do we build up? What is the protocol of measurement? You have plenty of possibility to analyze minerals. What is then the right principle technology to come then to a final conclusion that you really can nail it down to one deposit? That is not such a simple task, and we have to work together on this and build up this database. And machine learning, AI, should then be a tool that is helping us to find exactly these tracks to get them to this conclusive decision. So that would be my answer to this question.
Thank you, Thomas. I think you'll just include that in your conversation with Mr. Kedi, because it's largely about data and analytics. Kedi is a commissioner at the ministry, and GIZ, maybe he could join you and bring his technology skills to the conversation. Coming to Nabil, I think the question that has been asked is under the pillar of social, under ESG, about whether you are facing any challenges from the communities or there are issues you have anticipated and how you are working towards addressing them.
Yeah, I often get asked this question in terms of are there social obstacles? Are there obstacles from the community that you have to face? And I think the answer to that, well, first you have to decide what your goals are as a company. Are you there to do right by the community or not? If you're there to do right by the community, most of the obstacles answer themselves. There aren't many problems. I want to just slightly relate back to what I was saying about the jurisdiction as a whole. Probably one of the differences between this part of the world and maybe the West is that if you go into a rural area in the West and you try and do a mine, people are going to chase you out immediately. That's their first reaction. They don't want you there, they don't want mining, they don't need you. Whereas here, people welcome you as an investment. So I think if you get the foundational ideas right, that they're looking to benefit from the investment as much as possible, and as a company with strong focus on ESG, you do want to make sure that they benefit as much as possible. So you set these plans into motion right from the start. We started upskilling the community years before we even had a notion of when we'd be in production. Putting kids through school. We have children that we put through school and are now in university. and we're expanding this program. It is not probably as easy as I make it sound. There are numerous things to face along the way, but I think the answer is always continuous engagement with the communities, continuous engagement with the local government, sensitizing throughout. We do sensitizing at the beginning of every operation. We get the whole community together, gather under our mango tree, and tell them this is what we're doing, these are our plans for the company. They have one simple response always to us, which is, let's get into production quickly. We want to see those other benefits that are not just there in exploration, but are there in production. We want the jobs. So I think navigating local politics is sometimes a challenge, but you do have to, the only common answer I can provide is transparency and engagement throughout. You build that into the foundations of your operation.
Thank you, Nabil. Nabil, I think you've made justice, because the issues around communities is constant engagement. And yes, transparency, and it's always a work in progress. It keeps on being done. You have to continue doing the job every single time. There is no single solution that you do this and that is it. But I think Carl has a couple of rejoinders.
Quick question that might be of interest to everyone. I was interested to hear how you work with the community and the, say, social issues. Do you have in-house staff doing that work? Would you possibly team up with like an NGO or CSO or like that?
So I've had some discussions with the people, with some individuals today who offered to partner up and help us with some of our CSR, which I thought was fantastic. They could sort of they would be more efficient at distributing things to the community. We've done our own initiatives of upgrading the water supply in the nearby village, 3 or 4 boreholes plus water tank. We've donated to the local school. We've provided jobs, we've provided scholarships, we've supported the medical facilities. But of course, we are not very good at that sort of thing. We're not good at monitoring how these things are used. So I think the role of certain NGOs is something that we haven't hitherto pursued, but looking forward could be central to how we do things. As it stands right now, we have a community officer on the ground. Our area is actually a community. It's a customary land, meaning it's owned by a sort of group of people collectively, and they formed an association at the time of maybe 8-9 years ago, at the time of establishing the mining lease. So we understood them as a community, their organizational structure, who we talk to about what they need, and we sort of manage it that way. But I think we would welcome with open arms the involvement of certain NGOs in the distribution of some of the CSR activities. Yeah.
Okay, I think that is a good one, which then brings us to Siraj. Almost a similar question, but this side on the NGO side. It's not a business like Nabil. It's basically, the question was, what are you doing as civil society to build capacity, especially in the artisanal mining space, where you have about 600,000 people engaged in the trade? Gold, rare earth elements, gemstones, name it, even developmental minerals. What is it that you're doing, and how are you supporting the people engaged in that space?
Okay, thank you. I think her question initially, she was asking, what is it that we are doing as EITI? And the mandate of EITI is slightly different from that of civil society and government. Firstly, with EITI is like a torch. When there is darkness here, there is a lot of hidden this, hidden that. EITI comes and puts light, and everything can be seen. When you see something, then you can work on it, different stakeholders. And that's the mandate of EITI. That's why its major role is to enhance transparency and accountability and be able to generate a debate and participation of different stakeholders. That's why if, for example, we found out that there was capacity that is lacking with ASM, because you are aware that ASM form a very big part of our mineral sector, then I cannot take over KD's job to now build the capacity, do this and that. As EITI, they would put me off because policymakers are there to do all that. And therefore, our role is really to provide that mandate. We do as enhancing the transparency and accountability, getting out the hidden information for everybody to access it, and then the different stakeholders have to perform their roles. That's one. But coming back to him, the issue of civil society, and maybe I think Kedi may have many responses to that, there are very many initiatives that civil society have been doing in relation to supporting the ASM. I, for one, working with Oxfam, we have a number of interventions in Karamoja, in Busia, in Muweju, and also some even in oil and gas areas that we have been supporting communities, see how they can best benefit from the sector. But largely, as civil society, we work on mainly social issues. We may not go there to train people how to mine because we don't have the technology, but we want to go to the mine and maybe sensitize people to get children out of the mines, or even support children to go to school and leave the mines and maybe come later when they are seeking for jobs. Right now we are having a project financed by EU in Karamoja, which is having children from mines to school. We are trying to mobilize all those children, see how we can accelerate their education, and then be able to make them join formal schools at a later stage. So that's the kind of support we give to communities so that we are accountable to exactly our mandate.
Thank you very much. I would like to take a second round of questions, if any. Please raise your hand if you have a question for any of these distinguished panelists. Well, so we'll go into our final session. And our final session is basically 3 minutes of a parting shot from each one of you. And probably I'll start with Siraje, who spoke last. Your parting shot in respect to a responsible, sustainable, ESG-driven mining in Uganda.
My parting shot for me is that you cannot have sustainable mining if you don't have sustainable financing and if you don't have sustainable technology. So even agriculture technology, even the technology applies to the mining. Because aware that, for example, the artisanals who are really deficient, they don't have the technology, they don't have the money, and then you are telling them sustainable mining. That will be a joke of the day. Until stakeholders think about how we can make sure that these people who are destroying much of the environment are capacitated with the technology that is sufficient for them to get whatever hours they want to get from the underground. They are capacitated with sustainable finance. Sustainable financing is where the financing is not used to again destroy the environment, in my own environmental perspective. The financing that is not going to promote a violation of human rights. The financing that is not going to promote the ills against our mother nature, to destroy the biodiversity. So if we can have that finance and then be able to improve technology, then we should be able to talk about sustainable mining. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siraj. I come to you, Sebo. Your parting shots in about 3 minutes.
Thank you, Siraj. Thank you, Akri. So for me, it's important to recognize that the mining sector in Uganda, irrespective of the so many years we've been active, is still infant. And so it's important that as we advocate for sustainable mining ESG criteria, the ASMs especially that are involved in this business need to be aware what is the trade-off, because we're just not going to enforce something that for them is not business. So it's important that this information is packaged in such a way that informs them the impact of all these criterias and standards for easy application for them. It's also important that we embark on a deliberate efforts to train and skill. I mean, the curricula, I mean, I'm a Ugandan, I'm a geologist, and I know that we need to focus more on the skills that are needed to drive the mining sector forward, go more into vocational trainings, bring in these skills that train miners how to protect the environment, how to build underground tunnels, how to process. These are some of the skills that could actually be brought forward for these ASMs to help them advance to the next level. So for me, it's those points, and also, of course, a supporting legal framework that is based on the realities that we have in the mining sector. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you. Thomas?
Yes, thank you. I have maybe two reflections that I want to share, and the first one is about basic knowledge that we are actually lacking. I mean, it's not a coincidence that in ESG, the E, environment, is on the first place, but we still know too little about element that get mobilized in the environment is affecting actually the environment and also our health. So in Sweden, for example, we have our own discipline, medical geology, where we investigate how element mobilization can affect us. So just an example, we have uranium, for example. In Sweden, the threshold in water is 15 micrograms per liter. But if you then go to Czech Republic, it's 900. If you go to Russia, it's 1,700. So not even, within Europe and outside of Europe, we have a standardized, knowledge about when is uranium, and this is, of course, an element that we all know, is becoming a problem. So we need to invest a lot in basic research to understand better the nature, because only then we can have, protocols and technologies for sustainable mining. So that is the first reflection. And the second one is actually linked to the morning session. And Dr. Frank Mugheni made a very important comment when he said we should invest in young generations, capacity building. So we had the pleasure yesterday to visit the Makara University, and what we really want to do is we want to collaborate and we want to help, with capacity building. Because if we see, how much mines should open to actually have this green transformation happening, then we need much more people in the mining sector. We have to attract much more talent. And that is a very important reflection, and we should all work together to get more people into the mining pool. So, thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Carl, your parting shots, please.
Reflections. Well, one reflection that, some thoughts that just came up towards the end there when we started to get into ASM, which I think is a very interesting thing. Around 50 million ASM miners in the world, and you'd struggle to find a place where it's performed in a sustainable way. If you're generalizing things, you can say that ASM is simply not sustainable. It's very difficult to do something about it. So I think that's something that, Uganda has its policies set, how you plan to work with this. Lots of thinking perhaps needs to go into how you want your ASM sector to develop, treat different types in different ways, for example. That's just some thoughts on that. Two points. I had a sort of an aha experience today, and that was about the energy situation. I should have known, but I think it's a really important thing, game changer for Uganda with the renewable energy situation. Look at other countries, Zambia, and whatnot, struggling seriously.
Thank you, Carl. Nabil?
Yeah. So I've been, it's actually been a little bit frustrating for the last couple of years attending all the conferences and listening to everybody says that we have huge potential as a country, but nothing really seems to change in terms of the growth of our mining sector. It's still a few scattered small players. And I've been pretty cynical about it, but actually, until recently, with the things that I've been learning about our potential to be a genuine world leader, not just relative to the African continent, but a genuine world leader in the green energy or green mining space. And the reason I'm excited about it is because I think it's very simple. It's just a case of building a few small bridges that some intelligent people can help us do. And we'll be mentioned alongside the major mining destinations as the best in the world, and that's something I'd really like to see happen. So if anything, it's a call to action for some of the more academically minded people to help us bridge the gaps between different players in our sector, put everyone together, and really market us as the world's best green mining destination.
Thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, I think we come to the end of this panel, but I'd like to ask the panelists to stay behind. We'll have a small photo session. But just to recap what the panelists have discussed about, and probably this is to the benefit of a bit of government and private sector, Mr. Keddy, is that one, to be able to enforce some of these things around ESG and sustainability, we must be able to embed them in the legal framework, so that we can be able to monitor them, we can be able to enforce compliance. Two is that this transition, or being able to match the gap between the EU standards and where Uganda mining is, must be done in a just, fair, but also profitable process for people engaged in the mining sector. Three is that we have a bit of data, but we have not been able to interrogate it to give us the results that we desire. So in terms of traceability and analytics, we'll need to work on that data with the government and some of our development partners like GIZ, and Thomas has offered to have a conversation in that space. Four is the skills and training to be able to impart what is required for the businesses now, but also for future generations. And one of the other things that has also come out strongly is that while our legal framework could be okay, or rather is good, is that we still have a big problem with implementation and making sure that the things that we need to do get done. Also to amplify the fact that the mineral sector could not be able to grow if we do not have abundance of energy. And Uganda is gifted with a lot of renewable energy sources that can be developed in conjunction with the people that we are attracting for investment. And then the second last point that came strongly through is that before we talk about value addition, we also need to think about our competitive advantage for the different minerals that we need to work on. But then finally, is that as a country, we must be able to think business. To think business, to support our investors like Nabil, so that everyone has a win-win situation, and we stop the delays, we stop not understanding that every single moment, every single decision made or not made is a financial decision. So as a country, we need to start to think business. So ladies and gentlemen, join me in a big hand clap to thank our panelists who have joined us today. And I would request them to step forward for a photo moment. If there are any EU ambassadors in the room, kindly join us here for this photo moment. Please. Ladies and gentlemen, the program is still ongoing. We have a launch of about 7 projects in the main room. Please, when you step out of here, you can take the stairs to the first floor. There is the next floor.